So, hello everyone. I would like to thank everyone who leaves their comments and questions on YouTube. So today's video is going to address one of the questions from a YouTuber about how does trauma create perversion and direct sexual tastes. So it's a kind of deep psychological question, but I'll try to answer it from a spiritual perspective, kind of giving personal insight in understanding of this topic. So first of all, trauma, we have to understand what trauma is. Trauma is a contraction of consciousness. The contraction of consciousness, it's some sort of a moment where consciousness perceives limitation. And what is consciousness? Consciousness is the creative being. So the creative being is suppressed at that moment for a moment, or if it's an ongoing trauma, so it's continuously suppressed. And it reflects on our body. The body, the nervous system contracts. So that's how we identify that we are stressed. So trauma causes stress, but stress is nothing but a contraction of nervous system. And this contraction is created by consciousness feeling, but by sort of a blockage or prevention of the natural expression of the creative conscious being. So consciousness is that creative being, is that creative energy. I mean, we can use lots of words, but it's one and the same thing. So if you understand what I'm trying to convey here, you will understand that in the moment of trauma, one experiences kind of a unnatural being. And let's say a child expresses themselves freely, they're running around doing what they want, and then when the parents try to mold them into the social system or in some kind of a behavioral construct, they tell them, do this, don't do that. But that doing something and not doing some other thing is some kind of prevention from expressing one's own free being, because the child doesn't know about society and social behavior constructs. And so when the child is not yet aware of these things, the child just emanates their free being, their creative being. They express what they want, they say what they want. Now, throughout the time, we learn not to express ourselves in a free way. So we suppress our creative being. You may say that trauma is not just that which has been of the nature of abuse, but it's also the whole society is traumatic. The whole way we understand life has already been put into this traumatic context. And so when we are taught to stop ourselves, to restrain, to prevent ourselves from expressing our true, natural, innocent, childlike nature being. So we are already in a way traumatized. Our nervous system is used to react to certain stimuli in the external reality, or learns to not to act in a certain way in certain circumstances because we are told so. And so this is also traumatic. And now when we constantly are stopped from expressing our natural being, our creative being, the way it comes naturally, this energy doesn't go anywhere, so it has to come out somehow otherwise. And so usually when we are vulnerable with someone, when we are in a relationship, or when we are in touch with whatever element within the projected reality, these elements usually are there, created by our consciousness, and they are there to indicate us our limitations by triggering these limitations outwards. So by invoking these limitations. Now, when you experience deep connection with someone, usually your traumas will start manifesting themselves more vividly. And so because even if you experienced awakening, or you plunged into natural being through a connection with someone, experienced that unconditional love being, whatever you call it, that unconditional being where your creative essence manifested freely, you also, through that manifestation, can see the ways you repressed yourself. And it may scare you. It may also cause you to a reaction, to run away, to hide away, to question, to wonder. And you may also see your limitations clearly. These limitations could be of a perverted nature, of a corrupt nature as well. So maybe you've realized that when you're vulnerable with someone, you feel like expressing yourself in a particular way, also sexually. And so, but you have afterthoughts. What if I do so? What if people judge me? What if this? What if that? But so this is the traumatic response, is that of a suppressed nature, suppressed creative being. So now, through different kind of awakening, you may call experiences, whether through love, union, unconditional moments of love, or when you are just awakened to realize that, became aware, in other words, you realize that all your sexual preferences or sexual tastes, like you write here, or sexual perversion. Again, perversion is a desire to express oneself in a particular way, because that way or some other way was restricted in the childhood. And now it manifested through this particular preference, or this particular fetish, or this particular inclination. Because sexual interaction is when you feel free, or supposed to feel free. And even if you do not feel free with your partners, but maybe when you watch something of sexual nature, or you feel this pull to still express this side of you, even if you don't share it with your partner, you feel it's still suppressed there, and it needs to be expressed. That's why a lot of people resort to pornography and different kind of sexual services, because they kind of want to keep relationship going, but yet they still have these traumatic, suppressed psychological, let's say, sexual responses, where their needs are not satisfied because they're not truly themselves, because they are afraid to express themselves. And so they need these services, they need whatever stimulation of that kind to let it out. And there's nothing wrong with it. That's why we see the majority of people nowadays start expressing themselves more and more, because it has reached the unprecedented level, because the majority of people are not healed, and their healing, or their way of healing, is their demonstration, exhibitionism, or their way to just draw attention through that sort of expression. But it's just because there are too many people who need healing, and too few beings who can actually help and unravel the reasons behind this kind of behavior. So that's why we have the society that starts stretching the range of accepting, or the range of acceptable types of behavior, or sexuality, manifestation, demonstration of sexuality, at least in the Western society. Now, in other cultures, these things still remain suppressed, but they are still there, because cultures with suppressed attitude still have a lot of trauma, taboos, which need to be somehow manifested and expressed. And that's why there is a lot going on behind the scenes, which is not talked about, but it's still there. So in whichever culture, in this day and age, people are very suppressed, their creative being is suppressed, they cannot embrace their nature for whatever reasons. And so the only way they can freely express themselves, or try to at least, is through sexuality, because sexuality is a direct expression of self and own unrepressed being. So that creative being, which normally through the social construct or religious beliefs or whatever beliefs, we suppress. So that's why. And trauma means that state of contraction that needs to be released. And the longer it stays there with you, the harder or the more crystallized it becomes, and the harder it is to actually dissolve it, because it will take longer time, because it has taken longer time to crystallize. Now it will take longer time to heal it. And healing means dissolution, meaning the realization of the root cause of the trauma and surrender into that pain, allowing that pain or whatever suppression to come out without afterthoughts, without that feeling of guilt or shame, where whatever is experienced is just surrendered to that moment of now and allowed to manifest, let go, and that's it. But certain suppressed aspects of ourselves we cannot express, because they could also mean hurting someone else, because the reason for the trauma is being hurt by someone else. So, I mean, in this case, of course, people need psychology, psychiatric help, maybe psychological help, psychospiritual therapy, whatever healing, where they can slowly, gradually, step by step, in small doses, express themselves and release the tension of trauma. Because trauma is experienced as first contraction, but the longer it stays there, the more it crystallizes into ongoing tension, ongoing restlessness and anxiety, ongoing, contraction of certain area in the body that eventually manifests as a maybe even incurable disease or some kind of a organ failure or gland failure. So all of these things are interconnected, interrelated, and trauma is always crystallized with time into a certain health issue, imbalance, or even incurable disease that eventually leads us to decay, draining, loss of energy, and death. Because this trauma creates an energetic hole, which manifests eventually in the form of a physical ailment, disease, so on and so forth. So, but many traumas are also manifested in the form of a constant contraction of the nervous system, where people live in continuous anxiety or depression or whatever imbalanced psychological, psycho-emotional state, because the trauma is not released, is not addressed, because the pain hasn't been faced. But instead, people resorted to numbing, taking certain medication to numb the pain, to distract themselves, or they choose some aspects of projected reality to distract them. But the reason is not addressed, and sooner or later it will be manifested in their or through their sexual desires, preferences, fetishes, and even perversions, depending on the degree of that trauma and the circumstances in which that trauma occurred. Thank you very much. If you need personal guidance in this case, you may always contact me and book a session, and I will be willing to guide you and address your issues and give you a deeper insight, personal insight on this situation or whatever you need personally. So thank you very much, and I hope you gained some clarity.